Okay, so it's not a NAMA day if there's not a technical issue. So let's see if we can get everyone back in. We had quite a few people waiting originally.
And then it wouldn't go live, so we had to recreate the whole.
Yeah, we had to recreate the whole live stream. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, we had one. Let's see if we can get everyone else back. If you're watching us, again, say hi. Let us know where you're watching from.
That way we also know that people actually made it onto the video.
Yes.
And we'll get started.
Yep, we'll get started in just a second.
That one's right? Nothing like being put on the spot.
Yes.
Let's see. So things we posted recently, I posted about chapters 5 and 6 for the book club. So if you haven't seen that, take a look at it. There was a little bit of conversation on it, but we'd love to have more people jump in. I think it was 5. Yeah, it was chapters 5 and 6. And then hopefully we'll get the last few chapters wrapped up pretty soon, and then we'll move on to, I think we're going to do Scent of the Missing next, because a lot of people are interested in that. Any other updates I should talk about?
Well, maybe we should wait up on updates while people get here. You should just do sing and dance number, just keep people. There's one person. Hey, let us know where you're watching from. Oh, there we go. Hey, Allison. Hey, Brian. How you guys doing? Can you guys hear us and see us okay? Everything good with the live stream? Okay, so let's get right to news. Any news? Any new updates?
I don't know.
We're at the point in Catfish's training, just an update on him. We're at the point in Catfish's training where we're considering putting him on odor. There's some ORTs coming up, and we're not sure when. There's one in October that's close by, and there's one in November that's in Arizona. And I was planning on doing a road trip this fall with him anyways, so that I could get him out to California with my friend and go hunting with him. And so maybe I'll stop by Arizona, do an ORT, continue the rest of the way, and do a hunting trip with him. So keep an eye on his training, because when we introduce odor, obviously things might get more interesting for some people, and you get to see us how we put our dogs on odor and what we do there.
Yeah, but we have a few months, so we don't
we have
to rush him still.
The other thing that is happening is in September, Dr. Roger Brannis will be in town doing workshops from us, so you should expect a live interview from him. If I can convince him, we'll do a NAMA with him, so you guys will be able to ask questions of an actual real ethologist.
That would be very cool.
Yeah, so and that might be a more broad live stream that'll be about scent detection, but also about just dog behavior in general. We might make it a dual purpose live stream, and hopefully that'll be interesting to all of you guys.
Yeah, and if anybody is interested in coming out, we still have spots left for the 2-day workshop he's doing for us.
He only he's doing one workshop a year in the U.S. with us. That's it. So if you have ever wanted to meet Dr. Brannis or work with him in person, this is your chance. Come out, don't miss it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're having 2-day workshop with him, and then 2 days after that for Ethology Institute, or is it 1 day?
I think 2 days.
2 days for Ethology Institute students, which if you're not an Ethology Institute student, you should go check out that website. But 2 days where you get to work directly with Roger and talk to him.
It'll be a pretty small group, and so
very
it should be a very sort of exclusive opportunity.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say before we get into rants and questions and all that stuff is I want to thank our patrons for making this happen. It's been a blast, and we're really enjoying it. And if you're watching this and you're not already a patron, consider taking a look at our Patreon site. We've got a lot of great resources for you, and it helps us devote our time towards internet stuff versus having to do daily stuff for money. I like giving my resources out as much as I can for free, and this you can help subsidize us putting out our resources for other people to have for free. And it helps us, feed our dogs and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we're always trying to create more content, and we want input from our patrons as well on the kind of content that you guys want, what you're interested in, what would help you. So do be letting us know about that.
Absolutely. Now, let's get right into why don't you talk about your book real quick, because some people might have missed it at the beginning.
Okay, yeah. So I a couple days ago posted on chapters 5 and 6 of Fred's book that we're reviewing, or doing a book club for. So take a look at that. There's been a little bit of conversation, but we'd love to have more people join in. Even if you haven't done all of the reading, feel free to ask questions. Give your thoughts. And
disagree with the book, disagree with us. We want an open forum.
Absolutely. And we have just a few chapters left in there, and then we'll move on to the next book, which will probably be Scent of the Missing, which is about search and rescue. A lot of people were really interested in that book.
I'm gunning for this one.
Yeah, if everyone wants to spend $100 on a book.
Well, maybe I'll read it for you guys and post some interesting ideas. But man, this book looks fascinating. I can't wait to get started on it.
It's incredibly in depth. If you thought the first chapter of Fred's book was in depth sciencey stuff, this is a whole other level.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, chapter 1, olfactory predators and odorants. Olfactory organs of vertebrates, comparing olfactory abilities of humans to other mammals, use of olfaction by birds to locate food.
And that's a quarter of chapter 1.
Yeah, that's the first 4 pages. Yeah. So anyway, the olfactory concealment theory. What is that? That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Anyways,
we need to read it.
Yeah. Moving right along, rant. Okay. Keep in mind, these rants, the tone of the rants are for comedy purposes, and don't take them too seriously, but that doesn't mean there isn't truth to them, okay? So, I wanted to rant, and so did Natalie, about Show Me, okay? This is one of those super obnoxious things that we see, and when we see our students do it, we just cringe.
And if you've trained with us for any length of time, we've told you to knock it off already.
Show me, show me, show me. I hate it. Stop doing that. Or where is it? Where is it? The dog, if you're asking the dog that means the dog already told you and you missed it, okay? Also, it might mean nothing. If you're just talking to the dog and distracting them from their job. Do you really think the dog does a better job when you're talking to them? If that's the case, why aren't you talking the whole search? Now, some of you are talking the whole search, and your dog doesn't work better. I guarantee you the dog works better when you shut up and get out of the dog's way.
And it's also very common when people get nervous that they want to do something.
Yeah.
And they think that the way they can be involved in the search is to keep reminding their dog that they're supposed to be searching. But if they were to think for a moment, they would realize that their dog already is searching. They're just anxious. Or if their dog's not searching, just telling them search, 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 or where is it, where is it, over and over again, isn't going to fix the problem. It's a training problem, and you need to go back to basics.
Yes.
Or take a step, back from that search.
Mm-hmm.
But it never helps.
No. And I'm going to give you a behind the scenes of the Nosework training world. When you come into a search saying, show me, show me, show me, and then you leave the search, all the trainers and judges and COs are laughing at you behind your back. Oh my gosh, how many times did that person say, show me? Oh my gosh, where did they learn that from? Or, oh, that's my student. I'm sorry. That's embarrassing. Oh, no, okay. So that's the exact kind of thing that we're talking about behind the stage. And if you ever volunteer, you'll see it. You'll see it. But it's universally
happen. So we, I think, all have to sort of tamp that down in ourselves. And I think sometimes people see other students doing it, and so it just becomes something that's in the back of your mind. Not that anyone ever told you should do it, because I don't think there's anyone out there training that after your dog alerts and you miss it, you should ask them.
I mean, it's kind of one of those things that, all of us make fun of normal pet people for doing when we see them. Fido, sit down, Fido, please sit. Please, would you please sit? Fido, sit down. It's like, we know that that's ridiculous. But for some reason in Nosework, we don't recognize the same thing that saying, show me, show me, show me over and over again is also ridiculous. Basically, the more noise you make, the more ridiculous it is. One signal, one behavior. You should say something. It should mean something. You shouldn't have to repeat it. If you're having to repeat it, it means you're doing a poor thing in training. And secondly, show me is not something we've ever trained in class. We teach you a search command, which is search or find me. I've never seen someone start at the beginning, show me. And then if your command is search, why would you not say search when you wanted them to do something? Why are you saying show me now? Yeah. It's like when your dog sits on the word sit, and then it's not working, so you say sit down. It's like, how is adding something new going to help with that? It's not going to help. So
Yeah. And again, more often than not, the dog is searching, and you need to believe that they are and trust that they're working and trust your training. Because most of the time when we second guess that our dogs are working, we see the results at the end of the day and we're like, oh, actually they were doing their job perfectly and I was just being an anxious wreck.
Yes.
So those are important things to remind yourself of. And again, like if your dog has found it and you're wanting to ask them, where is it, or show me, then you probably need to take a step back and either allow them to go back to odor or leave and reapproach.
Leave and come back, exactly.
Because, verbally asking them, you're probably going to get nose pokes at the closest object that may or may not have anything to do with odor.
Honestly, it's a really safe assumption to assume your dog doesn't understand the words that you're saying. Okay, that's a really safe assumption. And the way I normally prove that is I'll take a leash of a dog and I walk over somewhere with them and I say banana. And what do the dogs do? 90% of dogs, you say banana to them, they sit. Why? Because they don't know what to say.
It's not even the same number of syllables.
No, it's not. It's not remotely the same. The dog says, oh, he asked me to do something. It's probably sit. Mm-hmm. Okay? So
they're like, oh, I wasn't listening. What? Oh, I guess I'll sit.
Replace the word you think that the dog knows with the word banana. So you're in this search and you say banana. What should the dog think that means? Does the dog think that means find the odor? Does the dog think that means look at me? Does the dog think that means sit?
Yeah.
The dog, I guarantee you the dog has no idea what that means.
And then if you do get a sit, you're even more confused.
Uh-huh.
Pretty much anything the dog does after you say that is just going to be confusing. It's not going to be clear communication.
Especially since a lot of us inadvertently shape our dog to nose touch objects in the search area. A lot of times when we're teaching the dog to alert on odor, the dog stops sniffing and they're just offering a nose punch with no sniffing involved. And so the dog thinks it's the nose touch that's important, not the sniffing of odor.
Yeah, so you need to watch for that, and you're rewarding that you're not accidentally creating that.
Yeah, and you can see the difference if you pay attention. But yeah.
Especially in other people's dogs.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. I think that's enough for our rant.
Today.
Okay, let's get to the first question. First question is, what are the pros and cons of entering advanced levels of trial for exhibition only? For example, your dog is NW1, but there's an NW3 with spots open. So first thing, let's define terms for people who don't know. In a competition for nose work, sometimes if the competition isn't filled with competitors and there's extra spots, they open it up for exhibition only. So that means you're not...
And you'll see that FEO.
Yeah, FEO. You're not in contention for a ribbon. You can't place. You can't title. But you can go and participate as if you were competing for a title, but you just don't get it.
So you're running the searches blind. You're getting that yes or no from the judge. So you're getting some of that, competition stress and ring time, but it's not as heightened. And it's also potentially at levels that you're not eligible for, like this questioner's question where they're only eligible for NW1, but the NW3 had spots so they could get in.
Yeah. So now the next thing is, let's talk about what it means to be at a certain level. The fact that you have a title or don't have a title is not an accurate representation of what level you are. Okay. So I could take a dog. Let's take element trials for an example. There are dogs that have just passed their ORT and dogs at the elite level or summit level now who are competing at level 1 element trials. Who's ready for that trial and who's not ready? How do you determine? It's not a clear-cut criteria. So just because your dog hasn't achieved an NW1 doesn't mean they're not ready for an NW3. That's a matter of throwing the dice, and sometimes a bad trial comes up, and even dogs at NW3, do you think that if they go back to NW1 that they're suddenly going to start titling? Maybe not. Anyone can have a bad trial. So it's not a matter of whether or not the dog's ready. In fact, I don't put my dogs on odor until I feel like they're ready for NW3 anyways. So my dog's ready. I would absolutely enter an NW3. The value of it is training in a new location, training under stress. That's the value of FEO at any level. And it doesn't, if you're at the NW3 level, I've actually recommended my students go back and do an ORT FEO. Why? Because it's a new location and it's stress. And that benefits a high-level dog, it benefits a low-level dog.
And it's containers, which almost everybody has trouble with.
Yeah, and we don't get, before element trials, we didn't have lots of opportunities to practice really competitive container searches like that. So why not go do an ORT? It's a great $15, $30, whatever opportunity to practice a competitive container search.
I think the other thing about to take the specific example of an NW3 FEO, is that you can run it, you can force yourself or allow yourself to run it a lot more competitively than you might if it was a trial on the line. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to cover my search area. I'm going to call finish. I'm not going to hem and haw. I'm going to see what I can really do if I'm not going, oh my gosh, but what if I miss one? And you can train yourself just as much as you're allowing your dog to have those experiences. But I think what's really important is that you don't, so say it is a fairly novice dog who's just getting into NW1. Maybe I would still, run them in an NW3, but I have to watch myself and my stress and how I'm letting that affect the dog, which should be easier to do at FEO. But I think that's the most important thing. Like, there are a few more hides in some of the searches. That's no big deal. Searching when they've already found the odor, that's really no big deal either. But putting that level of uncertainness, where the dog is wondering what happened to you because you always know when you're done. And now suddenly you don't, and you're wandering them around for 2 minutes. That I think could do damage if you're not careful.
That said, it's totally on you. That stress comes from you. It doesn't come from the dog.
Yeah, you can totally control that.
There's absolutely no downside to just walking a dog around for 3 minutes in a new area unless you make it a problem.
Yeah. But that's what's so important is if you're going to do that, you have to watch yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be really careful.
Yeah.
And I think that same thing is true. I probably harped on this recently already, but like, say you're trialing a young dog. Say you decide to take a 6-month-old or 1-year-old either to AKC or into NACSW or whatever. And so you're trialing them pretty young. You're trialing an emotionally immature dog. If you can't handle that stress for yourself, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to affect the dog and it's going to affect their future trials, and how they feel about nose work. So I don't have a problem with dogs getting ring experience young, as long as it's done really carefully from the handler's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it still shouldn't be overdone. Like, with how many AKC trials there are, and like in Southern California, you could be trialing every other weekend, basically. Yeah. Like, that's a ton. So be careful on that end of things too.
Now, all that said, I don't actually know if it's allowed for you to FEO a trial that you don't have a title.
I think you can, because there were people running in Summit who weren't eligible yet.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's great. I would totally do it. Absolutely. The more shots you can get in an NB3, the more it gets out of your system, the better.
Yeah. And again, you can take those risks.
Yeah. And you can see how actually the risk taking is better.
Yeah. And your dog should be fine. I mean, they're probably going to be more accurate in some ways than a more advanced dog might be. Yeah,
because they actually have a much more clear history of go to source, whereas advanced dogs have been neglecting that for the most part statistically. But yeah, that enough on that question.
I think so.
As always, if you have follow-up questions, make sure to let us know.
Yeah, I'll look at those while you
next question.
Read the next one.
What age do you start puppies / young dogs on odor, and what are your thoughts on fear periods and their relationship to being on odor? This is a question we get a lot, and there's a lot of different opinions out there. My answer to this question is always, I don't care what age the dog goes on odor. That's irrelevant to me. What's relevant to me is the dog's hunt drive, independence, problem solving, and confidence at the level I want it to be before I put them on odor. I might even start pattern training the dog before I put them on odor. In fact, I need to do some threshold exercises with catfish.
Yeah, I've been doing pattern training threshold stuff with dogs on food quite a bit recently.
Yeah, so there's a lot you can do on food. So I have a criteria that tells me when we should go on odor. The dog has to be able to do a certain set number of things. They have to be able to hunt in a new environment. They have to be able to search for food enthusiastically in a potty area, for instance. They need to be able to do blind searches on food, the handler. They need to be able, there's several confidence challenges I have for them. You can find all these lessons online. They also, the next step is, okay, we got a dog that's really smoking. They're great. We got a good dog. So why do we put dogs on odor? For competition. So I have them look at the competition calendar and pick a competition they want to enter. They want to enter one in, let's say it's in November, okay? October, 1 month before, we put them on odor, okay? I like to put my dogs on odor 1 month before our competition. They don't need extra. All they need is to be a good hunter. And then I need to tell them, okay, now hunt for this. And the dog says, okay.
And if you're a novice handler, there are things you can do to help you be able to read the dog. Like
volunteer at trials.
Yeah. You can also, with your own dog, do some blind searches on food. Those are safer than doing blind searches on odor.
Yeah. Yeah. If you miss it, the dog still eats it.
Yeah. And then you're like, what are they eating? Oh.
Yeah. I should have called alert. Now, about fear periods in relationship to being put on odor. There's a lot of people who talk about this. I think Amy talks a lot about this, and she's got some really interesting thoughts that are worth considering. My general feeling is that dogs who go through fear periods, because not all dogs seem to go through fear periods, it's not clear when they should be going through them or how many fear periods they should have or any of these things. But in my experience, dogs who go through fear periods, it's not a fear period. It's a lifelong fear problem the dog has. That's, to me, it just seems to be a euphemism for a genetic tendency for fear. And no matter what you do, the dog's gonna have problems. Whether you put them on odor, whether you don't have put them on odor, dogs who have fear issues are difficult to train, period. I don't know if it's worse by putting them on odor during a fear period or not. Maybe it is.
I mean, if you happen to notice that your dog's extra fearful, maybe don't put them on odor.
Yeah.
But that can be really hard to know. Like, people often say, well, wait till the dog's a year old. So Icy, I put her on odor at like 5 months because I had an ORT at 6 months I was doing, but that's beside the point. At 18 months, she had 2 really weird days where she was afraid of shadows and she was afraid of leaves and she was afraid of just about everything. And then she went totally back to normal. 2 days. No way I could have known that that was coming up.
Sure.
If I had happened to put her on odor over those 2 days, maybe it wouldn't have gone well. It's hard to say. I might have had some recovery to do, but there's no possible way I could have timed that, except that if I had seen her acting weird, okay, I'm not going to put her on odor today.
But a lot of these anecdotes, I can't go anywhere with them because dogs of any age can have that experience.
Absolutely.
Like Buster. Buster had that weird day at the trial the other day, right? Where he had a couple days where he was just being super afraid of things. Why? Who knows? Maybe it's some health issue that we're unaware of. Maybe it's not. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah, I don't think it's a thing that you can be fearful about as the handler putting the dog on odor, because then I think you're much more likely to screw up your dog.
Yeah.
So I think you build the best foundation that you can, and then you say, hey, I'm in a good mood today. My dog's in a good mood today. We've got a trial coming up. Let's put him on odor.
I definitely think one thing about young dogs is that you don't necessarily know who they are. I think we talked about this a little bit in one of the NAMAs recently, but you don't know. A dog who goes through adolescence might come out the other end having no food drive left or having no toy drive when they did when they were puppies. Puppies go in all directions all the time, and you can nurture that and stuff, but after adolescence, they can be a completely different dog than what you started with. So there is some argument for wait to find out what you have before you do that. But then there's another argument, which is if you know what you have, you got your dog from a specific breeding, from a specific line, you know what they're going to be like, then you're probably at a low risk situation. But if you got a dog from who knows where, then maybe be a little more cautious. And don't put a dog on odor that you don't think you wouldn't be proud to trial with today. If you wouldn't be proud to trial with them today, don't put them on odor.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm not putting Catfish on odor right now. I'm almost ready to say that if I competed with him, I would be proud to show him, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like I said in the last question, I think that your stress and nerves play a really big part in all of this. So you have to be careful about that. And I think that maybe for some dogs, you put them on odor young and it has a stronger meaning to them throughout their life. Not that you can't make odor very important to older dogs. You obviously can. I personally like putting my dogs on odor fairly young, but I am careful, and I also tend to get really high drive, crazy dogs. So that makes things a little different. Like if Icy had come, she hardly had a noticeable adolescence, but if she had come out of adolescence with no food drive, she has a ton of toy drive, vice versa. So there were some safeguards there, which, like Michael was saying, not all dogs have.
Yeah. The next question is very similar. I'm just going to mention the question because we basically already answered it, but it's, is it important not to rush from food to odor when starting a new dog? And if so, why? Is there an article I can read? For all the issues we've mentioned already, this is not so much about young dogs, but about new dogs. Yeah. So if I got a dog from a shelter, I'm not going to put them on odor immediately. I'm going to try to find out who the dog is. I'm going to go through all the same stages of training, whether they're young, whether they're old, whatever. The only
Some
exception
things may go faster depending on their age,
absolutely.
But you know, an older dog probably has better problem-solving skills. A younger dog might have, you know, less fear. Like, it just depends on the dog and their history.
Yeah. The only exception I'll make to this rule, if you come to me with a 15-year-old dog who's about to die and you really want to earn a ribbon with him, I'll put you on odor. I don't care. And I know that you're not going to care if he messes it up or does something wrong. You know, you're just out there having fun. Now, do I think you could have just as much fun just playing on food? Probably. But if that's what you really want to do with that dog, so you have some piece of memorabilia to be nostalgic about later, I'm okay with that. I don't think there's some like dogma about don't put on odors for a year of training. I don't believe that.
No, but it does, you know, if you want a long, good career with your dog in nose work, then that changes your approach.
Yeah, you want a strong foundation if you want a long career. So don't neglect it. Don't rush to odor if you don't have a reason to.
Yeah, and one thing about the way this question is worded, with the word rush, I think you'd never want to rush them, except for the 15-year-old dying dog example. You don't want to rush stuff. But rushing looks different for different dogs. For some dogs, they need 6 months plus on food because they're dealing with severe environmental issues or people issues or other dog issues, something that makes them not super solid on the game. Other dogs are incredibly solid. They've been agility dogs for 5 years, and you know, they go everywhere and do everything, and you're just adding another game, and they're super food driven, and so maybe you need a few weeks or a month or two. So rushing, you can't just slap a number on it. Rushing is totally different for different dogs.
Absolutely.
All right.
The next question is also related, and so I'll spin it in sort of a slightly different way. But after the primary stage, how do you go about pairing food with odor and then fading the pair? So I'm going to address primarily how to fade a pair and when and why and how, but not in detail. Eventually, I'll post a lesson video specifically about all of this on Patreon. And there's already a Patreon document about pairing that you can look at right now. That's why I'm a big fan of pairing. So I'm going to first ask some questions to you, which is one, how do you fade the treat for agility? Okay, so I'm training in agility and I want to be competitive. Let's not take the average pet dog. I'm talking about a highly competitive team for agility. When do you fade the treat out for agility? The answer is partially, you never fade the reward out. You always want your dog fast and sharp, so you never get rid of the reward. You might stretch that reward so it's not after every jump, but maybe after a sequence of 3 or 4 jumps. And you may build some resilience so that the reward can be delivered in different ways or be delayed, or and you definitely want the dog to be able to finish a whole course without a treat intermittently. But you never fade out the treat. You keep rewarding always, and that goes for everything. Everything in herding and hunting. The fortunate thing is the reward is built into the activity. The reward is the sheep, and it's part of the activity. In nose work, when you're fading the pair, why do I want to fade the pair? There's an idea in our heads that we believe that if it's paired, the dog's not really finding the odor, they're finding the food. If that's what you believe, you don't need to fade the pair. You just need to put out food distractions. So now we've got paired hide and food. And the dog tries to go to the food and it doesn't pay. The dog goes to the paired hide, boom, it pays. So the dog's learning, okay, only food that smells like odor pays. Food that smells like food never pays. Okay? You don't need to fade the pair. Now, that said, this is what I do with dogs in my class. I pair for about 1 week. Okay, so I pair, so it's a weekly class. So on Wednesday, we introduce the odor, it's paired, reward, wonderful, because I always reward and pair. Then the next week, it's not paired. And it's not paired the whole class. It's paired, and then it's not paired, and then it's paired again, and so it's random. And I don't tell the owner until after the class. I say, by the way, it wasn't paired sometimes. And
because people get so weird when they know it's not paired.
They do. And what I want to see is, did the dog make the association that odor, it's odor and it's not just food? And once I see the dog is finding odor, even without the food there, then it's pairing from then on out. We always pair. I always pair with my dogs every single time. The only time they don't get paired is when they're at a trial or when they're at a workshop. And
You do have to look at your individual dog and see if you're creating any funny behaviors, and then you would want to address those specifically. I was working with somebody whose dog, when it was paired, and it would just kind of grab the treat, and she would know it was there, and then she would kind of rush in and pay. And if it was like, say, blind and not paired, the dog would go, it's not paired, and move on. So that's something where the handler needs to be rewarding differently, and also reading the dog better.
Yeah, but that's not, you need to stop pairing. That's, you need to reward better so the dog wants to stay.
Yeah.
If the dog wants to stay, they won't leave. Why would they leave? You know.
But those are just things that, you know, if you're having a problem and you think it's related to pairing, then it may very well not be, but you should talk it through with a trainer or a few trainers.
Sure.
And figure out how to address it.
Yeah, sure. But it's so, the main thing I want to steer you away from is it's not about fading the pair. You test the dog. Sure, you can test the dog. Don't pair it one time. See if the dog finds it. Fine. But you don't fade the pair out. It never disappears. It's a training tool that's useful throughout all stages of learning of the dog.
Yeah, when I'm doing, an extra challenging hide that I really want my dog to push, through things or higher, I did a hide the other day with my dog where they had to climb on a table and then climb on a higher shelf. That is, just the perfect time to pair, because I want my dog to get all the way there.
Yeah.
And believe that they can and be rewarded immediately when they get there. And so that's, a super advanced hide setup that you might say, oh, well, at that level, the dog shouldn't need pairing. It's not that they need it. It's that I want them to get, when they worked that hard, to get that instantaneous reward and to get it from the environment and not just be, feeling like, well, if I'm not right there, then they're not going to get paid.
And this whole rationale is included in the pairing document, so you should make sure to look that up. Yeah, it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't. That's not why we pair. We pair to get the dog away from the handler so they're not reliant on us. And it serves that purpose. As soon as you're the one rewarding consistently, the dog will start working you instead of working the odor. And that's going to cause false alerts. It's going to cause missing hides. It's going to cause all sorts of problems. So, next question.
Sure.
As always, follow-up questions. Make sure if you have them to let us know. I was setting hides in the backyard for my dog today, and I thought it would be fun to put it in the kiddie pool. I remember we did this one time before. We love doing this in summer, setting water hides. Why is my dog scratching? It's great. I didn't quite know the right way to do it. Should it be in a tin, in a plastic nosework straw, in a plastic container with a lid? And then once you use the Q-tips for water hide, it can't be reused again. Correct. So a couple things about that. One is there are better ways and worse ways to do this, but there's nothing wrong with just setting a hide for your dog so that they can work that hide problem out. So you don't have to overthink it. You can just set a hide in the kiddie pool and let the dog find it. If you have the odor obedience, the reward history, and the timing on your part, then you can have fun with just about any hide. Amy is a great work to the hide, and that you could reward that if you wanted. And we can get more from the dog if we want. Mm-hmm. So she's a great great person at doing this kind of stuff.
And she has a whole slew of workshops around the country in the next year.
Yeah.
So if there are any that you can drive to,
highly recommend.
And we are working with her on getting a spring 2020 date. So if you're in the Missouri area, we're hoping to get details out on that pretty soon. But we've been going back and forth, and I think we've pretty much narrowed down a date. But we'll get that out to you. But she's going to be in Texas. She's going to be on the East Coast. She's going to be on the West Coast. Just look out for that stuff.
The way I like to do it is I like to start on the outside of the kiddie pool, and eventually, again, we'll put a lesson about this. But I don't want to throw it right in the water and expect my dog to go in. If you don't know if your dog's going to go in the water, don't start with a submerged hide. Start with a hide on the side of the kiddie pool. Let the dog find it, and then I work my way till it's halfway in, halfway out.
And we tend to use a tin because it's the easiest way to do it.
And it's magnetic, and I can put a magnet on either side of the kiddie pool, and it'll stick right there, and I can slide it around.
And you don't, like that straw is kind of gonna move around a lot more, and it's just slightly more complicated. But you really could do whatever you wanted. I wouldn't do a naked Q-tip though.
And keep in mind that the humidity that's going to be around the pool, if it's a hot day, is already a significant change. It doesn't have to be submerged for it to be difficult. It can just be very humid. And then once it is submerged, I just, I keep it close to the edge so the dog doesn't have to go in, and then you can pretty much put the hide in. There's no right or wrong way. Again, I use a tin. That tin's going to rust, so you're going to eventually need a new tin. I don't reuse those Q-tips. I throw them away.
Yeah.
Because they're soaking
usually
wet.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
And I usually do, so after I'm kind of in the water fully, then I often do one on a rock so that it's maybe halfway down the depth of the pool.
Yeah.
And then I'll do one flat on the bottom of the pool. And I like to, if I have them, do rocks or other objects around so that it's not the one object at the bottom of the pool for, them to see visually.
Yeah. The other thing is, as a trainer, you have to be creative, and there's always a way to be more progressive, to take smaller steps. And so if your dog's struggling, you need to find where were they not struggling, and where are we struggling, and what can I do between the two that helps bridge the gap.
And last summer when we did I think 2 weeks of kiddie pool hides for the BHOP classes, and several people brought kiddie pools. So it was this whole kind of big thing.
Yeah, we had multiple pools. It was fun.
Yeah, but there was a dog in the class on food. So we did food hides in the water, and
I was thinking
beautifully.
I wanted to do that with Catfish.
Oh, we should. I'm going to film some water hides tomorrow, so we should do that with him.
Yeah, we'll live stream it maybe. It's Catfish's training, so all Catfish's training is live streamed for you guys, or filmed and posted later. So we'll do some submerged hides with him on food. Why not, right? Yeah. That's the kind of stuff that we should be doing at the food stage and not waiting to odor.
Then you can see what of your food floats really well and what sinks, and you might want to play around with some different stuff. But
I had a student come once, and we were doing just bobbing for hot dogs for fun, and she threw her fancy Whole Foods organic hot dog into the pool, and it floated, and mine were sinking. I was like, I don't know what's more scary. I feel like a hot dog should sink.
And if your dog is a little unsure about water, you could play around in a non-noseware context of, food in the water and, working them through that. Lumi, our husky, hates water. She doesn't want to go out and pee when it's raining. She won't walk through puddles. But we played around for years with every once in a while, we'd be throwing hot dogs in the kiddie pool, and she'll actually offer just to walk in and stand there.
And she looks up at you like, give me the hot dog.
And so I feel that she, has a much better chance of working a water hide since she's gotten over that a little bit.
Yep.
All right, next.
Okay, the next two questions are very similar, so I'll read them both. And
that was just me in case you didn't send her. So just
okay, I'll just read the second question. So what should you do when your dog goes back to a hide they've already found and been paid for, both in practice and at a trial? There seems to be many different opinions on this.
There sure are.
There are. So I'm going to give you a couple different things. One, the first thing I want to start with is this is a false problem. Okay, it's not a real problem. The dog got back to a hide because you let them get back. If you don't want to pay them, don't let them back. Be a better handler and cover your search area evenly. What I see handlers doing is constantly bringing their dog back to the hide they've already found. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to pay them,
not letting them leave the hide.
If you want to pay them, if you don't want to pay them, I don't care. It's a waste of time. Don't get back to that odor. Take the dog somewhere new, right? You got a leash. Use it. Use the leash to get somewhere new. Okay, now.
And also, this is not a problem in NW1/novice because there's one hide and then you're done with your search. Mm-hmm. So this really becomes a problem in NW2 and equivalent and above. And of course, if you're practicing a lot of multiple hide stuff before then.
That said, it is a problem at NW1 because sometimes the dog hits the odor and leaves and then they go back. So if you've taught the dog you don't pay them for going back to odor, your dog may not go back in an NW1. I want a dog who goes back to odor, who always returns, who every time they hit odor demands to be paid. I want that level of odor obedience.
Especially at the lowest level. And some people will argue, and I would argue it, but wouldn't necessarily do it, that when you're prepping for an NW1, don't do multiple hide searches because you want them so focused and so dedicated onto that one odor, not thinking what other easier thing can I find in here, or what's going to be more exciting, or let me catalog first and then come back.
Yeah.
But it's so hard for people to want to do one hide that we usually, branch out. Although if you have an NW1 coming up like a month before or something, or maybe 6 weeks before, I would really narrow it down to just one hide searches.
But you have to decide, are you a competitive nosework person? Or are you just doing this for fun?
Yeah.
And It's the same in the agility world. When I explain this to agility people, they immediately get it. The average agility person gets bored if they don't just do full courses. They get bored when they do what real competitive agility people, which is drill sequences, drill handling, right? That's what they do. And that's what we should be doing in Nosework too. We should be drilling specific skill sets and not just setting searches. But now, going back to odor, and I think one thing should be said is before we worry about how I get my dog to move from odor to odor, we should have a dog that sticks, and goes back and gets paid. If we don't have that first, we don't build the dog that will never leave, then we shouldn't move to the next stage. And let's say you built that. Now, if you really wanted to, you could just not pay him for going back because you built that odor obedience. I don't recommend it, but at least go through that stage first to get to the next stage.
Yeah, I was talking with the class about this last night, and one of the things I was saying was, in any given dog, you're balancing their natural tendencies and their trained tendencies. So are they a dog that's super sticky naturally because they'd rather just stand there and keep getting paid as opposed to having to work more?
Yeah.
Or are they very, very reinforced by hunting and much more driven to go find the new one, find the new one, find the new one? And whichever your dog is, you have to balance them towards the other side.
Yeah.
So if you have a very, very sticky dog naturally, you can probably get away with more than someone who doesn't. Like when Icy was younger, she just wanted to move on to the next side. She would barely tell me about stuff a lot of the time. So I had to work a lot harder on stickiness with her. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next thing is, what do I do if the dog makes it back to hide, either by accident or by, intent? So let me give you two choices. I hit the hide. The time you wasted has already been wasted. You're not saving time anymore. You've already wasted time. So should I take the next couple of seconds telling the dog you already found that one and move them on? Or should I take the next couple of seconds saying, good dog, reward, move on? It takes the same amount of time. If not, the reward is a little faster. The reward boosts morale. Telling them to move on diminishes their odor obedience slightly, which may be something you want. Maybe you want to teach them that odor is not going to pay anymore. I don't want to teach them that. I would rather boost my dog's morale, and it's going to take the same amount of time. It doesn't take more time to reward them. Now it's my job as a handler not to come back. Whether you pay them or not, if you come back to that hide, you're in the same boat, right? So it doesn't solve your problem not to pay them again. Now in training, pick up your hide after you find it. Don't leave it down. You shouldn't leave a dog. The default should be, if I find it, I pick it up. And the only time I leave it down is when I'm training the skill of moving from hide to hide. That's the only time I leave the hides down for my dog.
Which, especially if you have a problem where you're bringing your dog back to the same hide over and over again, you probably do need to work on that. But you probably also need to video yourself and have someone work with you on covering your search area more evenly and not just sticking with that hide. And a lot of people get into the habit where they want to block the hide that's been found, and that just holds your dog there. And it also brings a lot of attention to the hide behind you. Like now you're blocking this very valuable thing that you don't want them to have.
Yeah.
And so often just moving on, though I was like, okay, on to the next thing. And it's no big deal unless we make it a big deal.
Yeah.
And I also think, especially in the NW3 level where you don't know how many hides there are, you may have found the only hide that's out there. And you're asking your dog to keep working. And you work around the whole area, and then you get back to the one hide that's there, and they tell you about it. And you say, yeah, thanks, I already know about that one. And you don't pay them, and then you take them around again. And so eventually they're going to say, there's no right answer. Yeah. I can't tell you about the one hide that is here because you won't pay me anymore. And there's no other hide. So what do? Do I false alert? Do I sit?
A lot of dogs do that. I just reviewed a video today who did that.
And in containers, it's even worse because now you have food and toy distractions. So extra things for the dogs to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a real safeguard to not turn hides off for your dog. And sorry, I just lost my train of thought completely. Go ahead if you had anything else to say about that.
Are there dogs who can probably do that, where they can turn the hide off and they find other hides and they're fine, they keep track of it? Yeah, probably there are, but most of us don't have that dog who can do all their whole job and keep track of the search area. I want to reiterate this one more time. If you're ending up at the same height over and over again, it's because you are being a bad handler, not covering your search area properly. You need to cover the entire search area evenly and not leave it up to chance where you end up. Oh, how did we end up here again? You ended up there again because you took them there. You need to direct the dog into the areas you want to search.
And we're often also so odor focused in our own like body language that we end up, once we know where a hide is in the search area, that's where all of our focus goes, because in our regular training, we're over focusing with our body language on where the known hides are. So that's something to be careful of in both known and unknown searches. But I've seen searches where the dog finds the hide, alerts, the owner doesn't call it, they move on, they come back to it, the dog goes, oh, it's here, but oh, I already told them about this one, so I better not tell them again. They don't remember that the handler didn't pay them for it or didn't call alert, and so now the handler doesn't have another chance to call it. So I think it really safeguards you to just pay them. I think when you get up into elite, you sometimes have to make some changes because the hides are so close together, and there's a little bit more need for them to be focusing on that next hide, even if they're directly in the odor of a hide right now. And so I sometimes do specific drills, especially when I'm doing really close pairs of hides, where I pay a hide and then have them move on, find the other one, and then I don't repay that one. But that is for short specific drills, and then I go back to other searches where I am making sure I'm keeping up the odor obedience. But that's not something I worried about at all until elite, because the hides just aren't close enough together most of the time in NW3 to worry about it.
Okay, so we got a couple extra minutes, so we're going to start taking live questions. If you have a question, go to Patreon and comment it on Patreon. Are we doing a giveaway?
We can.
Are we doing a challenge?
But did you have a challenge in mind?
No.
Well, I guess not then.
Yeah. Okay. We'll think about that while we're talking. We have another question here that I'm going to ask right now. So this person's Papillons were stumped by a high hide this weekend at NW2. The hide was 3 to 3.5 feet up, and they're underneath a table. How do you train for high hides? So I want to give you a couple answers to this question. The first is, dogs need to see a variety of hide problems, and we should be exposing those kind of things. I don't like inaccessible hides because it teaches the dog not to source, but that doesn't mean I have to hold my dog back from that. If you've been watching my work with catfish, we've been working high hides. And there's a video I haven't posted yet, but we did a high hide and maybe 6 feet up on the food stage, right? So this stuff should be happening, and we should be exposing the dog to it. But there's a more subtle point that I want to make. If I take a group of dogs, 30 dogs, let's say, all beginners, all been doing nose work for about 3 weeks, they all have roughly the same history. And I set a really high hide up. Let's say I set a 12-foot hide, right? Out of those 30 dogs, some of the dogs won't be able to work it, won't be able to find it. Some of the dogs will work a little bit and maybe give up, or maybe give us something that we can reward but isn't great. Some of those dogs are going to figure it out and get almost right to source, right? Or at least communicate very strongly exactly what the source is. So the question is, why do some dogs do super well, even though it's the first time they're ever seeing it? Why do some dogs not do so well? Is it breed type and size? Is the taller dogs just better? Are smaller dogs just better? Are they worse? I don't think so. I think it comes down to odor obedience. If you want, you can't possibly prepare for every possible odor scenario you're going to see at a tryout. What you can prepare for is building your dog as much odor obedience as possible so that they want to work through every odor problem that they see. Okay? That's something I can control easier than trying to proof against every odor picture. Anything to add?
Only about the specific hide problem that Brian lists, which is one on the underside of a table. Those can be particularly difficult. They tend to act like a suspended hide that has nothing to really like kind of grab onto and travel down. So there's all of this odor and not a lot of edges to work it from, especially for a short dog like Papillon. A taller dog might be able to use the edge of the table and work that back better, or be able to actually hold their nose to the underside of the table. A Papillon is kind of probably, even at their full height, not quite reaching the hide. And so that means to get as close as they can, they probably have to work it up on their hind legs, which is challenging. So it's something I would work on, and I would probably, if I can, set up some sort of staircase where they can get a little closer to be able to work it out better. But that's a particularly challenging kind of hide, but a good one to practice, especially with dogs tall enough or set up where they can source it, because it really helps them understand that kind of hide problem a lot better.
Yeah, elevated does not have to mean inaccessible. And if you want to set up elevated hides, you should find some clever way of making it accessible. What we did at the park with Catfish that you guys will see in a couple days. I have it all edited and ready to post. We set us, 6, 7, maybe 8 feet. No, 7 probably.
Probably 7, yeah.
7 foot up, but it was above a picnic table that was lifted the dog up to the point where they could reach it, right? So there are ways around the elevated and accessible problem if you're clever.
Yeah, I did hides with a couple of my students a few weeks ago and with my own dogs this week, where we had some shelving in the garage, and I put it up on the shelf. It was probably maybe about up to here on me, so around 5 feet. And I had a big 6-foot table in front of it, and for the student dogs, where I was a little more worried about their safety and, don't know them as well, I gave them an additional step. So they could go up on that and then up on the table and then up to the shelf to get it. And then with my own dogs, I know are both really good jumpers and they're pretty steady on their feet. So for them, I just waited, until they jumped up on the table and they jumped up. And so, pretty high hide, they're getting to work that problem from the ground and understand that problem better. But they're getting all the way to it and sourcing it. And it also, I think a challenging hide like that adds some kind of fun and intensity to nose work. And it's really exciting for them and me when they work it out and, completely solve the problem and get all the way to it. So they don't, with the high hide that they never get to, it's like, yeah, it's kind of up there. I'm pretty sure it's up there. But when they can go all the way up there and confirm it for themselves, I think it's a lot more meaningful to the dog.
Another thing I want to add to all that, to go back to my point about odor obedience, is we all know, we've had experiences, most of us have had experiences with our dogs where we put something up on a very high shelf or some food on top of the refrigerator or something, and the dog finds it and they're telling us there's food up there, there's food up there. I had one story of someone who has a little tiny terrier in the house, and he smelled like rats in the rafters, and he was pointing at a vent where the smell was coming out.
They couldn't figure out, they looked everywhere around their house for this hole, and then they finally see their dog pointing up in the corner of the ceiling, and there was a little hole in the corner of the ceiling.
So, odor obedience. Why did that dog able to find it? Is it because he's had so much experience with high hides? No, it's because he cared about rats enough to figure out the problem. And so, for me, if my dog's struggling with a hide, I shouldn't necessarily figure out what hide problem do I need to set, as much as why was my odor obedience not strong enough to help my dog, that my dog finish the problem out in the time allotted. But if you're competitive, you want both. You want the dog to have odor obedience and have seen that hide a million times in the past, and you have both, and then you win. Yeah,
I definitely want fluency is the word I like to use for my dogs, where they go, oh yeah, I know what this is, I know what this means. I can work this out in a reasonable amount of time. And with something like an inaccessible kind of suspended hide under a table, for a Papillon, probably all you need to know is that it's under that table and you can call it. And maybe they weren't giving you enough that you could say that. But sometimes we want hides in trial to be worked out a little bit more than they actually need to be. Not that I'm advocating for people calling stuff early, but I also, I don't like people working inaccessible things to death either. If your dog's going around and around and around, say like a wheelbarrow, and they're not making any kind of decision, why are they going around and around and around this thing? It's in there. It's, probably in the center down there. So just call it.
If it were a tennis ball or a treat, you'd know, oh, there's a tennis ball in there. I need to get the tennis ball for my dog. So just call it.
Yeah.
You're only holding yourself back because you're afraid of calling alert. Don't be a wimp.
Well, do we have any more questions?
Yeah, so I'm going to refresh the page, and if we don't have any more questions, then we're going to call it a night. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and again, thank you to all of our patrons for making this possible. If you enjoyed the show and you're not a patron, make sure to check out our Patreon site. See if you want to chuck in $1 and get access to all of our materials there.
And until you're ready to do that, you can look at all of the various free things.
Yeah, we have a lot of free videos on Patreon as well. So definitely enjoy that. And
yeah, and like we mentioned at the end of last month, tomorrow's our 11th wedding anniversary. We said we were going to do something special, but we're just drinking mojitos instead.
Yeah, sort of mojitos. They're with cachaça instead of rum because we ran out of rum. So like half caipirinha, half mojito.
Yes.
A caipito. A mopidinha.
So then date for next month, it's a 5-week month. Do we want to have NAMA on the 24th, which is closer to today's date, or the 31st, which is the last week of the month? Last day of the month.
Let's do it on the 31st.
Okay.
I think.
All right, so you've got a bunch
last
of
thing,
weeks to send your questions in.
On our Facebook group and on our page, we've been running a deal on online training for the summer. It's hot. Train at your own home in the air conditioning. If you're interested in that, let us know. We're offering a 25%
25% off if
discount.
you buy a package of 4, and that can be 15-minute lessons, 30-minute lessons, or hour lessons. I suppose you can do 45 minutes too, but
yeah, you could if you want.
If you really want, and you can do nose work, tri-ball, obedience,
tricks, whatever you want, anything you want. You want to learn violin? I'll teach you violin.
You want to bring some sheep into your living room? You could do that too, I guess.
Yeah, I'll teach you how to herd sheep in your living room. So, okay, thank you guys so much.
See you next month on the 31st. Send in your questions.